These chilling images from Tabasco, Mexico, capture the terrifying moment when a truck crashes into a small car, pushing it straight under another truck moving alongside. The tiny vehicle gets completely crushed between the massive wheels. Onlookers cautiously open the car door, bracing for the worst. Yet against all odds, the driver emerges completely unharmed. During the crash, the vehicle's metal structure formed a protective cocoon around the driver, ultimately saving his life. On this channel, I've covered plenty of real-life, fatal accidents. But today, I've compiled a list of the most mind-blowing survival stories. Just a heads up, as always, viewer discretion is advised. March 28, 2024, Eugene, Oregon. Shane Remke reaches for the door handle of Quick Trip Market. He hears a strange noise behind him, steps inside, and quickly shuts the door. Just seconds earlier, at a nearby construction site, a massive 1-meter concrete saw blade had broken loose from its machine due to a single loosened bolt. The spinning metal disc, moving at an insane speed, shot out into the street. Surveillance footage shows the blade slamming into the store's wall just a second after Shane shut the door behind him. The impact was so powerful that the entire building shook. Had Shane hesitated for even a second, the razor-sharp, jagged edge of the blade would have sliced through his muscles and tendons before crashing his bones. A hit to the leg might have given him a slim survival chance. But if it had struck his stomach, neck, or head, this would have killed him right on the spot. Still, Shane turned up physically unscathed, though the psychological damage suffered was severe. The incident left him with extreme panic attacks around saws and blades, forcing him to give up his carpentry career. Sometimes a single second of awareness can save your life. Other times, disaster strikes so fast, you don't even have a chance to react. 2011, United Kingdom. Matthew was speeding down the road on his motorcycle, with the speedometer hitting 225 kilometers per hour, when out of nowhere, something slammed into his helmet with a deafening crash. The impact was so intense that it shattered his visor. Shards of plastic flew into his eyes, literally blinding him. Within seconds, he lost consciousness, but his hand was still gripping the throttle. The motorcycle kept going at full speed until it crashed into a tree. The brutal collision sent Matthew flying several meters before he slammed into the ground. He even heard the sickening snap of his own bones breaking. The wreckage of his bike was scattered all around him. Struggling to lift his head, he looked at the debris to see what had hit his helmet. It was a pigeon. The bird had crashed straight into his head and didn't survive the impact. But did Matthew make it? Bystanders rushed to his aid and called an ambulance. When paramedics arrived, they found Matthew with a shattered skull and broken ribs. His condition was critical, yet somehow, doctors managed to save him. Matthew faced a long and grueling recovery, relearning how to walk, restoring his memory, and regaining his coordination. Stay alert on the road, and never underestimate the importance of a good helmet. However, the danger doesn't lurk just on highways. It can find you even when you're a retired senior tending to your backyard. May 26th, 2023, Maysville, Oklahoma. 81-year-old Carl Amos was mowing his lawn when he noticed a few bees buzzing around. But he didn't pay it any mind, until more and more started swarming right around him. Carl ditched his mower and hurried toward the porch to grab some insect spray. Yet as he stepped forward, he tripped and crashed onto the concrete walkway. A sharp, searing pain shot through his right leg. He had broken his hip and couldn't move. Within seconds, the bees attacked. They swarmed over him, stinging relentlessly for 3 agonizing hours. The swarm was so dense that Carl could barely see through the buzzing mass. Around 1 p.m., a group of construction workers was returning from their lunch break when one of them spotted someone waving frantically from behind a fence. When they realized it was an elderly man completely covered in bees, they didn't hesitate. One worker jumped over the fence, and the others followed. But the moment they got close, the bees turned on them too. Desperately, they tried to swat them away while shielding Carl with their shirts. At the same time, other workers dialed 911. When paramedics arrived, they grabbed a hose and immediately doused Carl with water to scare off the insects. Then they injected him with Benadryl to counter the allergic reaction and rushed him to the hospital. Doctors were shocked to find over 200 bee stings on his body, mostly on his face and hands, the only exposed areas. Ordinary honeybees don't behave like this, Experts later suspected that these were Africanized killer bees, whose venom contains melatonin, a toxin that can be deadly. Carl was incredibly lucky. If he had been found any later, the venom and allergic reaction would have killed him. On top of that, he had to undergo emergency surgery for his broken hip. If you ever see an unusually large number of bees near your home, don't try to handle them yourself. Get inside immediately and call a bee removal service. But if you work a high-risk job, the chances of facing life-threatening situations are even greater. December 7th, 2007, Manhattan, New York. Brothers Alcides and Edgar Moreno, both window washers, stood atop the 47-story Solo Tower. They stepped onto their platform, ready to descend floor by floor, until, in an instant, it plummeted from a height of 152 meters, leaving the Moreno brothers no time to react or grab onto anything. The impact was immediate. Edgar died on the spot. Alcides, however, opened his eyes. He tried to move, but a searing pain tore through his body. Seeing his brother's lifeless body left him in shock. But what truly overwhelmed Alcides was the fact that he was still alive. Rescuers arriving at the scene also could hardly believe it. Alcides had suffered multiple fractures, a skull injury, spinal damage, and internal trauma, yet he was still breathing. He was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, though the platform absorbed some impact. He remained in a coma. Then a Christmas miracle. 3 weeks later, Alcides woke up. His long road to recovery began, relearning how to walk. The investigation revealed the cause of the tragedy: improper installation of the platform's cable clamps. To make matters worse, neither brother had been wearing a safety harness, gear that could have saved them both. Some window washers choose to ignore the harness, thinking it's just an inconvenience. But this is a serious safety breach. A moment of inattention can result in a fatal accident, either for you or your coworker. One Reddit user, gmoney88, shared another chilling workplace accident. 2012. His friend was holding the ladder at a construction site while a safety inspector was climbing down with a nail gun. In a split second, the inspector lost his grip, and the tool slipped. A 7.5-centimeter nail shot straight into the contractor's head. Logic says he should have collapsed right on the spot, but instead he simply touched the back of his head, not even realizing what had happened. The man was rushed to the hospital, where doctors performed an emergency scan. The results shocked everyone. The nail had penetrated his skull, but miraculously passed between the left and right hemispheres of his brain, missing every major blood vessel. It was nothing short of a medical phenomenon. Just a few millimeters in any direction, and he would have died or been permanently paralyzed. Extracting the nail was risky, as infection and internal bleeding remained a serious threat. Surgeons had to do their job with extreme precision to avoid further damage. The surgery was a success, but the recovery took a long time. The man struggled with mobility in his left leg. This was the result of minor nerve damage. Only after months of rehabilitation did he regain full movement. Always follow safety rules on construction sites and make sure to turn off your tools before handing them to a coworker. Still, no profession is more dangerous than the one where your job is to save lives while putting your own on the line. September 11th, 2001. Joe Torillo, FDNY firefighter, wasn't scheduled to work that morning. However, when news broke of a plane crashing into the North Tower of the World Trade Center, he knew he had to help. He rushed to Engine Company 10, the fire station directly across from the Twin Towers, borrowed gear, and ran toward the scene. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Torillo ordered medical personnel to evacuate their base further from the buildings. Moments later, the South Tower collapsed. A massive wave of debris buried him, fracturing his skull, breaking his ribs, and causing internal bleeding. The man was trapped under the rubble, unable to move. Darkness surrounded him. The sounds of screams filled the air. Then, rescue teams spotted him and pulled him free. Torillo was rushed to a boat on the Hudson River for evacuation. Just as he thought he was safe, the North Tower collapsed, and Joe was buried in debris all over again. Only this time, he was found unconscious and taken to the hospital in critical condition. For 3 days, his family believed he was missing because the borrowed gear he wore had someone else's name on it. When they finally discovered he was alive, their relief was overwhelming. Like the others in these stories, Joe faced a long road to recovery. His injuries forced him into early retirement, but as extreme as these dangers are, Sometimes nature itself becomes the greatest threat. March 2023, Mount Baker, Washington. Francis Zuber and a friend decided to snowboard off-trail, away from the designated ski resort areas. The untouched forested slopes made for a more thrilling ride. Suddenly, Francis noticed something that stood out against the endless white landscape. A red snowboard sticking out of the snow just a few meters ahead. It was almost vertical, as if it had been planted straight into the drift. But where was its owner? As it turned out, another snowboarder had passed through that very spot just minutes earlier. The board belonged to Ian Steger, an experienced rider and fan of off-trail adventures. He had decided to cut through a stand of trees, unaware of the hidden danger: tree wells. These are deep, soft holes that form around tree trunks. The branches block snowfall from reaching the base, creating a pit of loose, unstable snow. If someone falls in, especially head first, escape is almost impossible. That's the trap Ian had fallen into. In an instant, he was buried upside down in the snow. Breathing became harder with each passing second. Minutes ticked by, and the air was running out. If he had been on the resort's designated trails, someone would have spotted him right away. But out here, the chances were much lower. The fact that Francis and his friend happened to pass by at the exact moment was nothing short of a miracle. Francis wasted no time. He rushed over, frantically digging through the snow until he discovered the snowboarder's face. Ian managed to take a breath, barely conscious yet still alive. Francis quickly pulled out a shovel and dug out the rest of his body. The entire rescue was captured on his GoPro. That day, Ian and Francis became friends, and since then they've continued snowboarding together, though much more cautiously. If you're heading into the mountains, never go alone. Always ride with a partner and avoid risky routes, whether on snow or on water. July 9th, 1960. Niagara River. 7-year-old Roger Woodward was sitting in a motorboat with his 17-year-old sister, Diana, and family friend, James Honeycutt. James often took the kids on boat rides along the Niagara River, but that day, the adventure didn't go as planned. At some point, the motor started malfunctioning. At first, it seemed like a minor issue. Honeycutt tried to restart the engine. Unfortunately, as the minutes passed, the boat drifted closer and closer to a dangerous place: the edge of Niagara Falls. Then, the engine completely died. The powerful current overturned the boat, throwing all three into the icy water. Diana struggled desperately, trying to get closer to shore. Luckily, tourists John Hayes and John Quattrochi spotted her. Risking their own lives, they climbed over the railing and managed to pull Diana out just meters away from the waterfall's edge. Meanwhile, Roger and James were swept over the 57-meter drop into the raging abyss. Fortunately, before the trip, James had put his life jacket on the boy. It helped Roger stay afloat. Crew members of the tour boat, Maid of the Mist, which operated near the falls, spotted the child. They threw Roger a life ring and pulled him on board. The first thing he asked was whether his sister was alive, and if he could get something to drink. Doctors later diagnosed him with a mild concussion and shock, yet he suffered no serious injuries. Roger Woodward became the first person in history to survive a plunge over Niagara Falls with nothing but a life jacket. As you may have guessed, James Honeycutt was not as lucky. His body was found 4 days later, further downstream. Always check your boat's engine before heading out on the water, and never approach hazardous currents. Now, another thing that's even more dangerous than water is fire. November 1992, Hawaii. A helicopter hovered over the crater of Kilauea Volcano. Inside the cabin were 3 men. Cameraman Michael Benson pressed his camera tightly to his shoulder, trying to capture dynamic shots of molten lava erupting from the Pu'u crater. His assistant, Chris Duddy, observed the process carefully, while pilot Craig Hosking kept the helicopter at a safe distance. They were filming scenes for the Paramount Pictures movie Sliver, starring Sharon Stone. It was supposed to be one of the film's most stunning shots, a real volcanic eruption. Before the shoot, the team tossed a bottle of gin into the crater as an offering to the local goddess, Pele. Yet the bottle got stuck between the rocks, and later they would realize that was a bad sign. A few minutes later, Hosking realized the helicopter was too close to the crater walls. He tried to pull back, but it was already too late. The rotor blades clipped the rock. A deafening metallic crunch tore through the air. The pilot lost control, and the the helicopter began spinning uncontrollably. Eventually, it crashed onto a ledge inside the volcano, miraculously avoiding the lava. Still, there was no way out. The men were surrounded by sheer cliffs, and volcanic fumes made visibility near zero. Breathing was becoming increasingly difficult. Meanwhile, on the surface, rescuers received a distress signal and took the risk of descending into the crater with another helicopter. They quickly spotted Hosking, as the wreckage was clearly visible from above. He was brought on board, but the fog kept getting thicker, making it impossible to continue searching for the rest of the camera crew. The helicopter had to leave and head for the nearest hospital. Chris Duddy, through sheer superhuman effort, managed to climb out of the crater on his own, scaling 45 meters to safety. However, Michael Benson was trapped. He was stuck on a narrow ledge, about 18 meters below the crater rim. Climbing up alone was impossible. He had no food, no water, and was slowly suffocating. The rescue helicopter couldn't get close enough to reach him. By the second day, Benson was growing weaker. As soon as the weather cleared, the pilot launched a risky operation. He hovered over the crater while the rescue team lowered a rope with a net. The steam was so thick, they couldn't see a thing. All they could do was wait. Michael, using the last of his strength, climbed into the net. The helicopter slowly began to lift him out. At 20 meters above the ground, the aircraft suddenly jolted, and the rope started to swing wildly. But the rescuers managed to secure it just in time, and Benson was safely lifted out of the crater. At the hospital, he was diagnosed with chemical pneumonia from inhaling sulfur fumes, along with dehydration and frostbite. Still, he made it out alive. The most frustrating part? The footage that nearly cost 3 people their lives was never even used in the final cut of Sliver. But maybe that was for the best after all. Those shots became a reminder that no cinematic shot is worth approaching an active volcano without proper protection and an evacuation plan. And yet, even this isn't the most unbelievable survival story I've prepared for you. December 24th, 1971, Peru. 17-year-old Julianne Kopke sat in her airplane seat on the Lanza Flight 508, gripping her mother Maria's hand. They were flying from Lena to Pucallpa to celebrate Christmas with Julianne's father. Outside the window, the sky darkened. A storm was approaching. Every gust of wind made the plane tremble. Suddenly, a bright flash lit up the sky. Lightning struck the wing. The plane began tilting violently. Passengers were tossed back and forth. Then another strike, and the right wing tore off completely. Lanza Flight 508 disintegrated in midair, and Julianne, still strapped in her seat, was ejected from the aircraft, falling from a height of 3,000 meters. She squeezed her eyes shut. Impact. Darkness. Julianne regained consciousness, dizzy, ears ringing. She turned her head and saw she was lying on damp leaves. Her head was spinning, her right shoulder was broken, and her arm was covered in an open wound, already infested with tiny white larvae. There were no signs of the plane, no signs of the other passengers. She was alone. It turned out that Julianne was the only survivor among the 92 passengers on board, and all because she had fallen from the plane, still strapped into her seat, which slightly cushioned the landing. Alone and helpless in the jungle, she remembered the most important survival rule her biologist parents had taught her: always follow the water. So she pushed forward through the dense rainforest, stumbling and falling into mud. She had no food, only a couple of candies. She drank from streams and collected rainwater. Insects swarmed her constantly. By day, the sun burned her skin. By night, the cold cut to the bone. But the worst part was seeing parasites crawling in her wounds. On the 9th day, she stumbled upon an abandoned hut, where she found a canister of gasoline. She poured the fuel directly onto her wound, gritting her teeth as the parasites wriggled out. By the 11th day, her mind was so foggy she could no longer take another step. Then suddenly, she heard a sound. At first, she thought it was a hallucination, but then she saw a boat full of people. So Julianne gathered the last of her strength and screamed. At first, the loggers thought she was a forest spirit. Yet when she spoke to them in Spanish, they immediately took her by boat to the nearest village. And from there, she was flown to a hospital, where Julianne reunited with her father, who had believed he had lost both his wife and daughter. He wept. After this event, Julianne Kopke became a biologist, dedicating her life to studying the Amazon rainforest. She wrote a book, When I Fell from the Sky, and became a symbol of incredible survival. Have you or anyone you know ever experienced a miraculous rescue? Share your stories in the comments and subscribe to my channel for more real-life survival lessons.